All right, good morning, everyone. And today we are moving on to the next chapter, and we are still on your text, First Flight. All right, we haven't moved to the other text. So I'm continuing with the text, First Flight. And after completion of the poem, The Trees, the video of which was uploaded yesterday, we move on to the next chapter, that is chapter 8, titled Mijbil the Otter, written by Gavin Maxwell. Now, this is a story about a man, in this case, our narrator, who had lost a pet, all right, a dog. And since he had been having a pet for a long time, he felt that he could not do in life without a pet. And that is how he comes across Mijbil the otter and how he is able to bring him back from one country to the other. All right. Now, before we read, there's a brief introduction to the story, which reads: Gavin Maxwell lives in a cottage in Camusfearna in the West Highlands in Scotland. When his dog Johnny died, Maxwell was too sad to think of keeping a dog again. But life without a pet was lonely. Read what happened then in Maxwell's own word. So, like I told you, he had lost a pet, all right, and he could not even think of keeping a dog again. But then he was so used to having a pet in his life that he felt that he could not do without a pet. And that is where the story is written in Maxwell's own word. And we begin the chapter from the text, reading from the text, page 104. Early in the new year of 1956, I traveled to southern Iraq. By then, it had crossed my mind that I should like to keep an otter instead of a dog, and that Camusfearna, ringed by a water a stone's throw from its door, would be eminently suitable spot for this experiment. When I casually mentioned this to a friend, he as casually replied that I had better get one in the Tigris marshes, for they were as common as mosquitoes and were often tamed by the Arabs. We were going to Basra to the Consulate General to collect and answer our mail from Europe. At the Consulate General, we found that my friend's mail had arrived, but that mine had not. I cabled to England, and when 3 days later nothing had happened, I tried to telephone. The call had to be booked 24 hours in advance. On the first day, the line was out of order. On the second day, the exchange was closed for a religious holiday. On the third day, there was another breakdown. My friend left, and I arranged to meet him in a week's time. 5 days later, my mail arrived. I carried it to my bedroom to read, and there, squatting on the floor, were two Arabs. Besides them lay a sack that squirmed from time to time. They handed me a note from my friend. Here's your otter. So, early in the year 1956, the new year of 1956, our narrator, that is Gavin Maxwell, had traveled to southern Iraq. And by then, he had already lost his dog, all right, like I had mentioned before, and he had made up a mind to keep an otter as a pet. Because since otter requires water, there was a water source just near his house. And he very casually mentioned it to a friend that I wish to keep an otter. And even his friend, in very casual manner, replied that, well, you can find it in the Tigris marshes, as they are very common there. All right, they are so common that it's you can spot a otter as easily as you can spot a mosquito. So there were that many otters there. Now, once they had to go to the consulate general in Basra to collect their mails from Europe. All right, and they were waiting for some mail, and the friend's mail arrived immediately, but his mail did not arrive. And back in 1956, it was not so easy to make a phone call. A phone call had to be booked 24 hours in advance, and he had to call up England. The first day, the line was out of order. On the second day, the exchange was closed. On the third day, again the line was closed due to a breakdown. Sorry. And finally, 5 days later, his mail arrived. Already in the meantime, his friend has left, and he had told his friend that he would meet his friend in a week's time. So 5 days later, his mail came, and he carried it to his room. All right, he carried it to his room to read the mail, and there, inside his room, were two Arabs. They were squatting on the floor. All right, and they were carrying a sack, and the sack was moving. All right, it was as if something was kept inside the sack, which was alive. And then there was a note which they handed it to him. And on the note, it was written, "Here is your otter." And it was sent by his friend. So his friend, who had gone back earlier, managed to find the otter and send it to him through the hands of two Arab men. With the opening of that sack began a phase of my life that had not yet ended. And may, for all I know, not end before I do. It is, in effect, a thraldom to otters, an otter fixation that I have since found to be shared by most other people who have ever owned one. The creature that emerged from the sack onto the spacious tile floor of the consulate bedroom resembled, most of all, a very small, medievally conceived dragon. From the head to the tip of the tail, he was coated with symmetrical pointed scales of mud armor, between whose tips was visible a soft velvet fur like that of a chocolate brown mole. He shook himself and I half expected a cloud of dust. But in fact, it was not for another month that I managed to remove the last of the mud and see the otter, as it were, in his true colors. So now, as soon as he opened the sack, it began a phase of his life which was not present before. He opened the sack and the otter came out, lying down on the tiles of the consulate general's bedroom. And the first look when he looked at the otter, the first thing it reminded of him was of a small dragon. All right, it had scales, not genuine scales. The otter also has fur like dogs. All right, उनीहरूको dog, cat हरू जस्तै fur हुन्छ. But since they are in water body, near water bodies all the time, उनीहरूको जिउमा चाहिँ मडहरू पुरा टालेको थियो अरे. And because the mud had dried up, all right, माटो पुरा हिलो लागेको चाहिँ सुकिसकेको थियो अरे. So it looked like scales. Scales as in जुन चाहिँ माछाहरूको हुन्छ. So it looked like that. And the otter shook itself, all right, just like when dogs get wet and they try to dry themselves. So Otter shook itself, sorry, and our narrator thought that since he is shaking himself, there will be a lot of dust flying around. But then it was not the case. In fact, Uleke Bandasa, to remove all the dirt from the otter's back and to reveal its soft fur, it took him almost 1 month. Mijbil, as I call the otter, so he named the otter Mijbil, was in fact of a race previously unknown to science, and was at length christened by zoologist Lutrogale perspicillata maxwelli, or Maxwell's otter. So the otter was an unknown animal to science, all right, and one of the zoologists named Lutrogale perspicillata maxwelli was the name given to the scientific name was Lutrogale perspicillata maxwelli, or Maxwell's otter. For the first 24 hours, Mijbil was neither hostile nor friendly. He was simply aloof and indifferent, choosing to sleep on the floor as far from my bed as possible. So for the first night, Mijbil did not reveal his personality. Or maybe he was very, maybe he was in a state of shock to be in an unknown, unfamiliar territory. It neither showed signs of being friendly, It neither showed signs of being an aggressive animal. It just sat there very far from the bed. The second night, Mijbil came onto my bed in the small hours and remained asleep in the crook of my knees until the servant brought tea in the morning. And during the day, he began to lose his apathy and take a too much keen interest in his surroundings. I made a body built for him, and an hour he went wild with joy in the water, plunging and rolling in it, shooting up and down the length of a bathtub underwater, and making enough slosh and slash for a hippo. This, I was to learn, is a characteristic of otters. Every drop of water must be, so to speak, extended and spread out about the place. A bowl must at once be overturned, or if it will not be overturned, be sat in and splashed in until it overflows. Water must be kept on the move and made to do things. When static, it is wasted and provoking. So on the second night, the otter felt at ease and he slept atop of the otter's knees. And he slept very soundly until the servant came in with the morning breakfast and tea. And then when he placed the otter inside the bathtub, he noticed that the otter was very happy. He was swimming the length of the tub again and again. And one thing he noticed about the otter is that whenever there is a body of water involved, whether it's a tub of water, whether it is a bowl of water, the water has to move. All right. Static water, the water which is not moving, is sort of wasted and provoking for the otter. Whenever, even if he sees a small bowl of water, he tries to overflip it. If he can't flip it, he sits inside the bowl and splashes till the water overflows. So for the otter, movement of water is very important. He, or it rather, does not like uh, the water to be static. I'm referring to Mijbil as it because till now the gender has not been revealed to us. 2 days later, Mijbil escaped from my bedroom as I entered it, and I turned to see his tail. So we know that Mijbil is a male. Turned his tail, disappearing round the bend of the corridor that led to the bathroom. By the time I got there, he was up on the end of the bathtub and fumbling at the chromium taps with his paws. I watched, amazed. In less than a minute, he had turned the tap far enough to produce a trickle of water, and after a moment or two, achieved the full flow. He had been lucky to turn the tap the right way. On later occasions, he would sometimes screw it up still tighter, chittering with irritation and disappointment at the tap's failure to cooperate. So 2 days later, when the author entered the bedroom, he noticed that Mijbil was going inside the bathroom. He followed him and he saw Mijbil trying to turn on the tap. Maybe he had noticed the narrator pouring water that way. So that day he was lucky, all right, he was turning the tap the right way. So at first a little trickle of water came down and then the full flow of water came down. He was able to operate the tap on his own. And the author was amazed. But on some other times he would try to open it the other way. And when he tried to open it the other way, he further tightened. All right, tight gari pathaire त्यसलाई कललाई, and then he used to get irritated. त्यस्तो हुँदाखेरि चाहिँ he used to get irritated. Very soon, Midge would follow me without a lead and come to me when I called his name. He spent most of his time in play. He spent hours shuffling a rubber ball round the room like a 4-foot soccer player, using all 4 feet to dribble the ball. And he could also throw it with a powerful flick of the neck to a surprising height and distance. But the real play of an otter is when he lies on his back and juggles with small objects between his paws. Marbles were Midge's favorite toys for this pastime. He would lie on his back, rolling 2 or more of them up and down his wide, flat belly without ever dropping one to the floor. So, very soon now, the otter got used to the narrator's presence in his life. All right, he wasn't afraid of him anymore. In fact, He used to follow the narrator wherever he went without even using any sort of leash or a belt. And when the narrator called his name, he would run to the narrator and he would play a lot of games. But his favorite game, in fact, any otter's favorite game was to lie on its back and balance things with his paws. Midge, short for Mijbil, also used to like that, and his favorite toy was marbles. The narrator would give him a couple of marbles, he would lie on his back, and he would play with the marbles, balancing it with his paws, never dropping a single marble to the floor. Right? So, at the end of part two on page 106, I stop for today. I have completed part one and two, and 3 and 4 will be done the following video. Now on page 106, you will find that there are a couple of questions. All right. Number one is, what experiment did Maxwell think Camospherina would be suitable for? So, as per what we have read, we know that experiment which Maxwell talks about is getting an otter for a pet. All right. And why Camospherina? Because it has water bodies near it and the otter would feel at home. Number two, why does he go to Basra? Basra, he goes to a consulate general to get a mail from England. How long does he wait there? So he waits for 5 days. And why? Because his mail did not arrive and he was unable to make a telephone call to England. So in this way, I'm sure you'll be able to do all the 6 questions. These are very simple questions and the answers are there in the text itself. I want you to attempt this. First of all, I want you to read the text, all right? As I have been reading, you read along, underline the difficult words. Most of the meanings of the difficult words are given in the text itself on the right hand corner of each page. However, if you find some other words that are not present there, please do look up for its meaning and write it down. Read the first and the second part of the 8th chapter, Mijbil the Otter, and attempt the questions on page 106. All right. And tomorrow we'll be doing part 3 and 4 of the chapter, and we'll be completing it tomorrow as well. All right, thank you and have a good day.